Good morning. It is 8:07 a.m. on Monday, May 20th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, only a couple more days until Balticon, which I'm very excited about. Balticon is always a highlight of the year for me. But there's also kind of one particular topic on the internet's mind today, and that, of course, is the finale of Game of Thrones. And I'm not going to spend this video talking about that in too much detail, just because I actually am on a Game of Thrones podcast called Beyond the Wall that we'll be recording later tonight, and so if you want to know my feelings about the finale, you can go there. I will say, in general, I'm pretty happy. But, if you want more discussion than that, that'll have to wait. No spoilers from me, not here anyway. But I did want to talk more broadly, so less about like the details of the finale itself, and more just that it's interesting how this show became something that I think a lot of media people had thought was maybe couldn't happen again. And that would it ever happen in the future? Hard to say. And so what I mean by that is that it used to be for a long time that when TV shows were broadcast, maybe people could tape them on a VHS or something like that. But for the most part, it was on when it was on, and if you wanted to watch it, you had to be sitting there in front of the TV at that time. And there wasn't any element of this prospect that, I was busy on Saturday when it was on, so I actually am not able to watch it until Tuesday, so don't spoil me until Tuesday. And so it was this element where the audience was far less fractured because there were fewer entertainment choices, and everybody who watched a show watched it at the same time, and it became something that people could have these group societal discussions about. And I think with the increasing fracturing of the entertainment audience, people were speculating that that sort of sensation may never happen again, because how could you ever have that many people all encountering the same show at the same time and having that discussion about it? And yet Game of Thrones, despite being, niche genre show, at least by some calculations, and also being on a pay cable channel, and despite the fact that people have so many options now to watch it whenever they want instead of only when it airs, it nonetheless became this kind of societal touchstone where even people who didn't watch the show were peripherally aware of what was going on. And for the most part, especially in this season, not that I am defending this sort of behavior, but people were just so hot to talk about Game of Thrones that like any consideration of like spoiler warnings pretty much went out the window in this last season. And I'm not defending that so much as observing that something about this show made that happen. And I think that's really interesting. And it's a valid question to ask, could this ever happen again, or is this kind of the last gasp of that sort of thing? Because people watch so many different things everywhere, and they don't all watch them at the same time. Sometimes people binge a show, sometimes they don't get around to it for a few weeks. So movies to some extent are, that still tends to be, most people go to see a movie in the theater and they see it in those first couple of weeks, and so there's still an element there. But television being this longer term, ongoing, week to week thing that a culture could share in, I think a lot of people before Game of Thrones did it again thought that maybe it was done, that it wasn't going to happen anymore. Like even the shows that kind of became prestige television still really was a pretty small minority of the audience watching it. And I think in some cases, I think even the ratings, the amazing ratings for Game of Thrones are still important to keep in perspective. Like the actual number of people watching it compared to, say, the number of people who watched the MASH finale or whatever. It's probably a lot smaller because the market still is fractured, but Game of Thrones really brought people together for better or worse in a lot of ways, and I think that's remarkable and worth commenting on. But to reiterate how I started this video, if you want to know my detailed feelings about the episode, then you should tune in tonight to Beyond the Wall, the Game of Thrones podcast that I'm on, which we'll be recording later tonight. In the meantime, I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.